offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers. I want the truth.
And you have offended the Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, the Monitoring the Future numbers were released, the 2010 numbers. This is a survey that's conducted by University of Michigan, done every year since 1975, and it tracks students' self-reported use of cannabis and other intoxicants, and every year their use of these substances either goes up or down compared to the prior survey. No matter what happens since the prior survey, the Drug Czar, no matter who it is, always comes out to tell us that we need to do more of what we're doing. If drug use goes up, they say, oh my God, we got to crack down and do more of what we're doing. If drug use goes down, they say, see, what we're doing is working. We got to do more of that. This year has been no difference. This is from ABC News. The headline there, White House Drug Czar, teen marijuana use on the rise. The Office of National Drug Control Policy survey found that daily pot use among high school seniors is at 6.1%, its highest point since the early 1980s. In the past month, 21.4% of 12th graders said they had used marijuana, continuing an upward tick that began in the middle of the decade. Monthly, more seniors now smoke pot than cigarettes, a phenomenon not seen in nearly 3 decades. It's the decreasing perception of harm of marijuana that is leading to increased pot use, according to the Drug Czar. And this is the quote from Kurlikowski to ABC News Radio, quote, "If young people don't really perceive that marijuana is dangerous or of any concern, it usually means there'll be an uptick in the number of kids who are using. And sure enough, in 2009, that's exactly what we did see." End quote. Another quote, he says, "We have been telling young people, particularly for the past couple of years, that marijuana is medicine. So it shouldn't be a great surprise to us that young people are now misperceiving the dangers or the risks around marijuana." End quote. On the other hand, Kurlikowski said, a broad understanding of the harms of tobacco and alcohol has led to lower cigarette smoking and binge drinking in teens. Regular cigarette smoking continues its decline, and binge drinking, which is 5 or more drinks at one sitting, among high school seniors is down from 25.2% to 23.2%. Tougher enforcement has also contributed to these declines, Kurlikowski said. Quote, "We know that through education and enforcement, something can be done, but I think we should also be very concerned about these marijuana numbers, particularly among these very young people." How interesting that the Drug Czar would point this out. Let's go right to the data, because I charted this out for you so you can take a look and know for yourself exactly what we're talking about. This is the lifetime use of marijuana versus tobacco amongst 8th graders, and we can see that when medical marijuana came into effect in 1996 in California, that the lifetime use of marijuana, have kids ever used pot, was 23.1% among 8th graders. The ever used tobacco was 49.2%. That's 1996. Now, if we look at today's numbers, the 2010 numbers, 17.3% of 8th graders have ever tried marijuana, compared to 20% of 8th graders who have ever tried tobacco. So compared to when medical marijuana began, there is still fewer 8th graders using cannabis than when medical marijuana began. Yes, there's been an uptick in the past 2 or 3 years, but the number is still lower than before medical marijuana. Now, that number for tobacco drops from 49% to 20%. We see similar numbers here when we look at the 10th graders. 10th graders dropped from about 40% to about 33% of lifetime use. Amongst 12th graders, the number that they're pointing out that more kids smoke pot than smoke tobacco, 43.8% of 12th graders mention that they have smoked pot. 42.2% say they have used tobacco. However, if we look at the numbers all throughout the 2000s and the 1990s, since medical marijuana began, only 44.9% were using marijuana. In 97, it was all the way up to 49.6%. The numbers now are still lower than when medical marijuana began. And it's funny how the Drug Czar points out with respect to tobacco and alcohol, how strict enforcement of the law and education about the harms of tobacco and alcohol have led to these amazing declines in the tobacco and alcohol numbers. 65% amongst seniors down to 42% amongst seniors now. And when we look at the alcohol percentages, a same type of decline. In 1996, the number of 8th graders who said they had ever used alcohol was 55%. More than half of 8th graders had drank. That number is down to 35%. In 10th graders, from 71% down to 58%. In 12th graders, from 79% down to 71%. How did we get those kids to use less alcohol? We got them by strict carding. We carded them for their alcohol purchases. We had a public education campaign about not supplying alcohol to teenagers, and the kids themselves got the true information about the dangers of alcohol. We didn't lie to them about alcohol. But that's apparently what the Drug Czar is wanting us to do with regards to medical marijuana. He points out in that quote that only since medical marijuana has begun have we seen the increase in the kids using marijuana. However, as we point out, medical marijuana began in 1996. There were 4 states by 1998. By the 2000s, there were 8 states. We've been having the discussion about medical marijuana now for 14 years. Does the Drug Czar really think that only now kids are starting to think that marijuana is medicine? It's been going on for 14 years. It's also disingenuous in that the Drug Czar knows that the use of marijuana among kids in the states where medical marijuana laws have been passed have declined across the board. Normal Advisory Board member Mitch Earlywine co-authored a study of this, and it concluded, quote, more than a decade after the passage of the nation's first state medical marijuana law, California's Prop 215, a considerable body of data shows that no state with a medical marijuana law has experienced an increase in youth marijuana use since its law's enactment. All states have reported overall decreases exceeding 50% in some age groups, strongly suggesting that the enactment of state medical marijuana laws does not increase marijuana use. But the Drug Czar doesn't think so, as we look at the quote in USA Today. In the USA Today headline, "More teens smoke marijuana than cigarettes," the quote from Gil Kurlikowski is, quote, "I don't have any hesitation telling you that I think the legitimizing of marijuana and calling it medicine is absolutely the wrong message to give to young people," end quote. The story goes on to say, his daughter lives in Colorado, where medical marijuana is legal. When she drives his granddaughter, a high school freshman, past marijuana dispensaries, quote, "It's a tough explanation," Kurlikowski said. A tough explanation. Hard to explain to the kid why people could vote for medical marijuana to be legal, why there could be legal dispensaries, and why people who are sick, disabled, or sense-threatened could go and legally purchase a medicine that will help them. I don't understand why that's so difficult an explanation. What explanation do you give your kids when you're driving by the CVS pharmacy and there's all sorts of OxyContin and Percocet and Vicodins in there? That's not a tough explanation. There's a legal drug that can be considered harmful, that can be considered abused, but we can explain to our kids that people that are sick or disabled can use it with a doctor's supervision. I don't understand why that has to be so difficult for medical marijuana. Let me go back to the charts here and give you some more data from this. Again, this is the Monitoring the Future survey from the University of Michigan. And we take a look at how kids perceive marijuana is easy to get. This was part of the Drug Czar saying that, the kids find it easy or fairly easy to get marijuana. And these are the numbers that we find for all 3 drugs: green line, marijuana; blue line, alcohol; black line, tobacco. And this is kids that think it's easy or fairly easy to get a hold of these drugs. For 8th graders, alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana have all declined in how easy kids think it is to get. And yet, 41% of kids in the 8th grade still say it's easy or fairly easy to get pot. 2 out of 5 8th graders say it's easy or fairly easy to get pot. When we get to the 10th grade, the numbers have declined as well, but still 69.4% of 10th graders say it's easy or fairly easy to get marijuana. 70% almost. 7 out of 10 10th graders say it's easy or fairly easy to get marijuana. And when we look at the 12th graders, these numbers have been collected all the way back since 1975. We find 82.1% of 12th graders, high school seniors, say it is easy or fairly easy to get a hold of marijuana. 4 out of 5 high school seniors say it's easy to get marijuana. But let's go back to Gil Kurlikowski saying how, since medical marijuana has come along, it's made it the perception change for the kids and more of them are using pot because of that. Look back to the numbers for 1996. In 96, 88% of seniors said it was easy to get marijuana. In 2-3 years after that, 90% said it was easy or fairly easy to get marijuana. The same numbers as we saw in 1979 when 90% of kids said it was easy to get marijuana. So we've gone down from 90% since medical marijuana started to 82% now. So it doesn't seem to me like medical marijuana has caused it to be any easier for kids to get pot. Yet still, with numbers like 40% of 8th graders, 70% of 10th graders, and 80% of high school seniors saying it's easy to get pot, that is an indictment of what we're doing now. That is an indictment of today's prohibition. The drug czar just doesn't get it. What he is doing isn't working, and it's easy to prove by looking at the numbers for the decline in tobacco and alcohol, like we said before. Those alcohol numbers decline, those tobacco numbers decline. We didn't lock anyone up to do that. We didn't rip up gardens. We didn't shoot people's dogs. We didn't put people behind bars for mandatory minimum sentences to make that happen. All we had to do is educate people and start carding kids. Here's the number the drug czar was referring to with daily use of marijuana. These are 12th graders who say daily, the green line, that they use marijuana compared to tobacco, the black line. Do they daily smoke? And again, in 1996, that number was about 4.9% of high school seniors. About 5% of high school seniors said they smoked marijuana every day. Now that's up to about 6%. The number for tobacco was 22%. It's now down to 10%. We have cut daily smoking by high school seniors in half. And we never arrested a single person to do that. And we're talking about an addictive, legal drug you can get when you're 18 years old. A lot of these high school seniors may already be 18 years old and legally able to get tobacco, and yet half as many of them smoke every day as did when medical marijuana started. Again, education. The drug czar says that the kids don't understand that there's a risk factor involved with marijuana, and that educating the kids about the risks of tobacco and alcohol has caused their use to go down. Well, surprise, surprise, surprise. When kids have the facts in front of them, when they realize marijuana is a safer alternative to alcohol or tobacco, they turn to the safer alternative. One of the stats they brought up in this was how binge drinking by kids has gone down. Now, binge drinking in this respect is defined as people sitting down at one sitting, drinking 5 or more drinks. And then here are the numbers for kids who have been binge drinking within the past 2 weeks by grade. The question's asked, have you had 5 or more drinks at a time in the past 2 weeks? And we got this for the 8th graders, the 10th graders, and the 12th graders. 8th graders at the bottom. When medical marijuana began, 13% of them were binge drinkers. 10th graders, 22% were binge drinkers. High school seniors, 30% were binge drinkers when medical marijuana started. The numbers now, for the 8th graders, 7.2%. For the 10th graders, 16.3%. For the 12th graders, 23.2%. In other words, in all grade levels, binge drinking has gone down. So if you're telling me that marijuana smoking has gone up and binge drinking has gone down, I say hallelujah. That's less kids dying of alcohol overdoses. That's less kids getting in drunk driving accidents. That's less kids having risky sexual behaviors based on getting drunk at parties. Hooray for that. Now, nobody is saying that we should have kids using marijuana. Here at Normal, we have always said this is an adults-only activity. But what we have found is the prohibition of marijuana that we have engaged in has made marijuana a forbidden fruit. It's added more mystique to marijuana than it would normally have if it were just treated like any other substance. And since we've been lying to kids about marijuana, telling them it's the deadly dangerous drug, they don't believe us anymore. They don't believe you, Governor Gil Kurlikowski. They don't believe you anymore, I should say, because they know the government is lying to them about medical marijuana. They've seen the reports. They've seen the multiple sclerosis patients whose tremors stop when they use medical marijuana. They've seen the people suffering in severe and chronic pain who are able to move freely because medical marijuana helps them out. You can't bullshit the kids anymore in the age of Google. They can look it up for themselves. They can read the science for themselves, and the kids are not as stupid as you think they are. The numbers that we reported on yesterday with the lab in Flagstaff pointing out how all these kids were using spice because it wasn't caught in the drug tests, again, we are taking kids who would rather use marijuana and forcing them off to using something more dangerous, more deadly, because of all of our drug testing for marijuana, because of our craze about marijuana. You want to get kids off marijuana? Here's how you do it. You legalize marijuana, you make it dull, you make it boring, you make it old people's fun, and they won't want to have so much of it. That's what we saw from the medical marijuana states. With the youth use going down in medical marijuana states, it's not so much fun to party with granny's glaucoma medicine or uncle's back pain medicine. It's just not as much fun to the kids. Other things that we found here, investigators at Texas A&M Health Sciences Center also took a look at those medical marijuana laws to find out whether or not they increased youth use. They concluded, quote, "Our results indicate that the introduction of medical cannabis laws was not associated with an increase in cannabis use among either arrestees or emergency department patients in cities and metropolitan areas located in California, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. Consistent with other studies of the liberalization of cannabis laws, medical cannabis laws do not appear to increase the use of the drug." In the report themselves, the Monitoring the Future points out what are the percentages of drug use based on states. And you'll find from state to state, it doesn't matter whether there's a strict marijuana law or there's a liberal marijuana law to make it whether or not people use marijuana. We find in states like Nebraska and Mississippi that have some of the most lenient decriminalization laws, they have some of the lowest rates of use. Meanwhile, places that have very strict laws like Rhode Island have very high levels of use. The amount of pressure you put on people to use or not use marijuana seems to make no difference state to state. Furthermore, as we go on, talking about the harms here, the public is right about the harms. People understand that marijuana is safer. Half of all Americans now, more than half, will say that marijuana is safer than alcohol. And cannabis smoke is not dangerous compared to cigarette smoke and has been shown to have an inverse relationship with certain types of cancer. But just like Upton Sinclair said back in the day, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on not understanding it. That's what we have with the Drug Czar here today. The Drug Czar is required by law to oppose any liberalization of marijuana laws and required by law to lie about the potentials of marijuana and its risks. Let's be honest with the kids. If we would legalize marijuana and treat it honestly, we could go forth with the kids and show them the data that shows that youth use of marijuana, especially before the age of 16, is very detrimental to brain and executive function development. But they don't believe us when we say that right now because we've been bullshitting them about the man boobs and the gateway theory and, that's going to kill your chromosomes and make you an amotivated loser. They don't believe those lies, so when we tell them the truth, they don't believe the truth. Legalize marijuana, end the lies about marijuana, strictly card kids for marijuana, tell them the truth about marijuana and youth development, and you will see youth use of marijuana plummet. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm Radical Russ for Ganja John and Cannabis Carrie.